Sophia had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't speak up, even when things didn't feel right. She had grown up in a home where love was never kind, and every day felt like she was walking on eggshells, trying to avoid the storm that was bound to come. Her father, once a charming man, had changed after he lost his job. The laughter at the dinner table was replaced with tense silences. The look in his eyes, once warm, had turned cold and distant. His frustration would often spill over, and when it did, Sophia knew to stay out of his way. Her mother would cry, but there were no words of comfort. It was a pattern she'd seen so many times. Her father's temper flaring, her mother shrinking into herself, and Sophia, caught in the middle, unsure of what to do, always too scared to speak. When Sophia turned 18, she thought she could escape. She packed her bags and moved into a small apartment, telling herself that she was free now. She enrolled in college, and for a while it felt like a fresh start. She made friends, laughed again, and found solace in the quiet moments of her new life. But every time her phone rang with her father's number, a cold shiver would run down her spine. She ignored the calls, telling herself that she didn't owe him anything anymore. But one night, the text came. "You're not the little girl anymore. You think you're better than me? You think you can just leave us behind? You don't know what real life is like. I'll show you how much you really mean to me." Sophia's stomach dropped. She'd seen the anger in his words before, heard the rage in his voice when he'd yelled at her mother. But this felt different, more threatening. Fear tightened around her chest. She hadn't escaped. It followed her, no matter where she went. The next week, she received another message. It was late in the evening when she read it, her hands trembling. This time the message was accompanied by a photo. It was of her mother, bruised and swollen, her face hidden behind her hand. The words under the photo read, "I'm doing this because of you. If you ever think of leaving again, this is what happens." Sophia's heart pounded as she dropped the phone on the table. Her mother. It had happened again. Her father's cruelty had reached her mother, and it was because of her, because she had left, because she had wanted something more than this life. Tears filled her eyes, but even as they fell, anger began to rise within her. She couldn't let this happen anymore. She couldn't stand by and pretend she didn't care. The next morning, she drove back home, determined. When she arrived, her mother was sitting in the same spot, her head down, eyes fixed on the floor. Sophia didn't say a word. She just pulled her mother into her arms, hugging her tightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner." But her mother just shook her head. "You don't have to apologize," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You're not the one who's broken." Sophia looked at her mother, the scars both old and knew that no matter how far she had run, the abuse had always been there. But it wouldn't be like this anymore. She would fight for her mother, for herself. The silence would end. The road ahead wasn't easy, and it wasn't going to be fixed in a day. But that day, Sophia made a promise to herself. She would no longer let the fear control her. She would speak up. She would fight for a life that wasn't defined by pain. She wouldn't let anyone, especially her father, silence her again. For the first time, she felt free.